In 2024, the Sony Bravia 9 is the best mini LED TV money can buy. No, it is not cheap. But take a look at this. When you look at the mini LED panel next to another mini LED TV, in this case, it's the Samsung QN90C, typical of mini LED TVs. The fine level precision and control of the latest Bravia 9 is the difference. Today, we get into what makes the 2024 TV lineup so special. The Bravia 9, the Bravia 8 OLED TV, and the Bravia 7. Plus, we'll talk about the completely refreshed soundbar system from Sony. And there is definitely a game-changing feature. So by the end of Sony's presentation, I walked up to the Sony executives, right? I think their regional director slash VP or president was there. And I said, you guys understand that you're completely undermining Dolby Vision, right? Everything you've just showed me is you saying Dolby Vision sucks. We could do better. Today's video is brought to you by WhoKeys. Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows software cheaply? WhoKeys to the rescue. Use my coupon code SF20 and immediate discount with a free upgrade to Windows 11. At the bottom of this order where it says code CARD, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from WhoKeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can buy Windows 11 Pro or Office 2019 Pro with my discount code SF20. Yes, I've been using WhoKeys for the last several years on my own PC builds, and it just worked. Talk about the Bravia 7, the Bravia 8, and the Bravia 9, and of course, their updated soundbar system, which I think it's pretty awesome. So let's get into the various TVs that we saw. Now, the X90L still comes into 2024 as a carryover of 2023. It's still called the X90L. It is their entry-level Bravia TV in that it does not have mini LED, but its performance is actually pretty good. And if you guys saw last year's review, I was very impressed. I thought it kept up with the U8K and the QM8. The black levels aren't as deep, but when it's in full screen, it was there. It's in the black bars that you saw the differences, and the contrast may be a touch behind because less dimming zones, but overall it was good enough to carry over. And so obviously you guys know that is their affordable TV. What's interesting is we'll talk about the Bravia 7 right now. So the Bravia 7 has, 8 times as many dimming zones? And I'm thinking, wait, does that mean it has more dimming zones than last year's X95L, which we didn't get the 65 or the 75 inch, right? We got the 85 inch. But if you look at the specs, I was like, wait, the Bravia 7 is like the Bravia X95L or X95K from the prior years. And so that's their entry mini LED now. And then, of course, everyone loves the Bravia 9 mini LED. And you guys saw the footage of how those mini LEDs, that's what we're talking about, is it's not so much the mini LEDs and dimming zones turn on and off. They turn on and off with this gradient of brightness between off and fully on, and that's what separates them. So the other TV that you guys saw is the Samsung QN90C. The biggest differences between the QN90C or the 90D or the 95D or the 95C is that they have more dimming zones, but the subtle control of the dimming zones do not match what the Bravia 9 is doing, and this is unique to the Bravia 9. That level of control is not available on prior TVs. So the Bravia 7, for example, is old school brute force, right? It doesn't have that fine control, the precision dimming of the Bravia 9, just so you guys know. And this is called Sony called it their Amazon Prime Calibrated mode. And this is why I think it's a game changer. So we know Dolby Vision, what it does, right? So Dolby Vision is a dynamic metadata where scene by scene, it tells all TVs, this is the brightness in this scene, and then the TV takes that information, and so here's the problem. The TV itself then is responsible for processing that Dolby Vision. Just because it has information does not mean the TV can do the processing well. And so the TV has the Dolby Vision chip. So you have the Dolby Vision source, content, graded in Dolby Vision. It has all that metadata. And the TV then takes that metadata and then it has to do it right. And as we've seen, the only TV that actually consistently does it right is the LG OLEDs, right? That C9, C10, C1, C2, C3. And it makes sense because LG OLEDs have consistently been the Dolby Vision Select client monitors for Hollywood, so it better get it right. But everyone else, including Sony, has not been consistently able to do that. So Sony's like, this is a nightmare. What they've done instead is they've worked with Amazon Prime, and this is why I think it's a game changer. So Amazon Prime does something similar. They then grade it, but what they have done is they match the grade to each of these Sony TVs. So Sony 7, Bravia 7, 8, and 9. They look at the calibrated mode on Amazon. They match it to that specific TV. They send it back to Amazon. Amazon double checks. And so when you are watching Amazon Prime on the 7, 8, or 9, Amazon, let's say the Bravia 7, the Bravia 7 and the Amazon will send a specific trimmed version of Amazon Prime to the Bravia 7. It's designed specifically for the Bravia 7. So the 7 doesn't have to do anything more than what it already did. It already sent what it can do to Amazon. They've got their back and forth already done. So everything that comes out of Amazon Prime, live sports, the actual videos, content, movies, rented movies. So it's not just Amazon originals. And this is why I told them it's a game changer, is that it's one thing if it's just the originals. Oh, yeah, sure. If I enjoy watching The Boys or shows unique to Amazon. No. I was very clear when I asked the engineers at both Amazon and Sony. I go, wait a minute, what if I'm just renting movies like Oppenheimer or any of the popular movies, Barbie, right? And I want to get it specific to my TV, 7, 8, or 9. Can I get it on a rental movie? Yeah. Everything on Amazon Prime, if it sees that you have a Bravia 7, 8, or 9, it will send you a specific content designed for that TV. This is unheard of. This has never been done before. And so when I said, LG, G4, you have cinematic movement, you have that new processor, right? The AI director. What will Sony do to beat that? And this is it. They have worked closely with one platform. Now, this is not Netflix, so I'm hoping they do it with Netflix as well. Netflix has its own calibrated mode, but it's very similar to Dolby Vision, right? Hit or miss. Like, they send out their quote-unquote calibrated mode, and it's up to the various TV makers to match that mode to your TV. They shifted the burden on the TV makers. Here, the burden is on both Amazon and Sony, model specific. Bravia 7 has its own version of that feed from Prime. Bravia 8 has an OLED version for its WOLED, and Bravia 9. And so if you're asking, wait, what about the A95L? Not mentioned. So I think there is some kind of processing in these three TVs that unfortunately does not appear to be on the A95L. I'm going to double check with that, but it doesn't seem that you can even add it with a firmware update. So I have the A95L as soon as I find out more, but I don't think so. I really think this is unique to this new generation of 7, 8, 9. Now, this is all on paper. It's all in theory. We will definitely check that once we get any of these TVs, 7, 8, and 9. I will compare movies that are rented on Amazon Prime against my Kaleidoscape version, right? Standard HDR10. Does it do anything different? Because we've always complained, Dolby Vision, at best, it looks slightly different, not better. So, out of the box, right? So the goal is to avoid calibration because homeowners, they don't want to calibrate. They don't want to hire a calibrator. They just want it to work. This is Amazon's and Sony's attempt at saying, look, don't touch any setting. The minute it gets a Prime video feed, it will automatically set all your settings between the TV and the source. And of course, motion being what it is, I say you set your own motion, but everything else, color, white point, it knows your TV's tendencies. It will make the offsets necessary. In theory, I love it though, because at least it's model specific. I have never seen a stream from a source broadcaster, I was going to say Samsung, Netflix, Prime, Max, it doesn't matter. They have one generic HDR10 feed or Dolby Vision feed. All TVs get the same feed. But in this case, if you have a 7, 8, or 9, you get your own version of that feed designed for your TV. That's brilliant. But on paper, it sounds great. That's why I'm so excited. And Dolby Vision needs to respond to this because Dolby Vision relies way too much on the TV makers. Hisense, way too bright. TCL, sometimes the contrast and the color's slightly off. Sony, way too dark, way too bright, all over the place, right? LG, closest to ideal, but then at the end of the day, wouldn't it be better if Dolby Vision created a trim for every TV model? Because you know what? You took our money. Let's spend it on this. So we'll see about that. Now, let's talk about the Bravia 8 OLED. So it really is an 80L carryover with that additional feature being the Amazon Prime mode. So I talked a lot with my friends there and Brian, and we were like, you know what? Why would anyone get the Bravia 8 when the A80L is literally going to perform nearly the same? Well, you would if you are a heavy watcher of Amazon Prime. That is the only reason. And then we're assuming that there is that big jump in accuracy, right? So we'll compare and see if that does make a difference. But if it does, then yeah, that would be the reason to get the 8 over the A80L is you're a big Amazon Prime watcher. But if not, you're watching Kaleidoscape or Disc or Netflix, it probably doesn't matter. I think the A80L ends up being an even better deal because we know generation to generation OLED generally looks very similar until they get MLA. So the differences between the C9, C10, C1, C2, C3, and C4, very minimal, and Sony's no different, right? Without MLA, you don't get that huge jump. So Bravia 8, it remains to be seen what the value proposition is in terms of getting that premium over the A80L, because I believe the XR Clear is very similar to last year, with the only exception being the accuracy mode if you watch Prime. Now, for the big boy, the Bravia 9. Not just the number of dimming zones that is impressive on the Bravia 9, because over a certain point, it is diminishing returns, right? We've said it many times before. Unless it's a true dual cell, whether it's 800, 900, 1100 dimming zones, at this point, it's how well you control those zones, right? Because there's always that trade-off between black crushing, amazing contrast, but you lose shadow detail, or you have all the shadow detail, but you have blooming, right? So with shadow detail and the correct brightness, you're going to get a little bit of blooming, or the other way, you're going to dim the specular highlights, but get perfect blacks. That's why you get an OLED. OLED gets that. The problem is you dim the highlights. And so when Samsung went the other way and tried to give you back those highlights, people complained of blooming, and that was the last year's Q1 95C and 90C. So this year, it's you can't win, right? And that's why you get an OLED. And the price is very similar. However, this mini LED, this use case is slightly different. You're still going to have that trade-off, but what Sony is saying is this. Not only have they improved the black levels and the shadow detail, yes, you'll still get a little bit of blooming, but it's designed to watch scenes where it's 4,000 nits in a bright scene. This is something OLED cannot do. No OLED can do this, which is the scene is already bright. Let's say the entire scene is 400 nits, 300 nits. No OLED could get above 300 nits full screen. So this Sony Bravia 9 will have a bright scene, so you're on the beach. And then the sun is there, and that sun is 4,000 nits. So you have this beach scene at 400, 300 nits, and then you have a spot of sun or clouds that is up to 4,000 nits. That scene is only possible on the Bravia 9, and that's the critical distinction is there is no issues of black level or shadow detail. It's all about specular highlights within a realistic scene. The beach, the park, where you have the sun, right? Now, what makes this really impressive is, okay, so let's say you have a darker scene, right? You're at a park, shaded trees, and you have bright sunlight going through the trees. And you're going to say, aha, in that scene, what about the leaves? Do they get black enough or is there blooming? Well, that's the thing. If the sun is that bright, you're going to see that the shadow detail will not be perfectly black anyway. It will be slightly lifted, and that still looks natural. And so the Sony Bravia 9 makes a case for itself in those scenes. Obviously, if OLED could get to 4,000 nit specular highlights up to 2 or 3% window and perfect blacks, that would be the holy grail. But OLED cannot get a full APL of above 250 to 300 nits. It would just burn out and cause burn-in. I mean, the power board is not designed to do all of that. And ironically, Mini LED is now more efficient at a certain brightness level than OLED. Now, QD OLED, WOLED is not as efficient as QD OLED. So QD OLED, so let's talk about QD OLED. Do you need this brightness? So the answer is no, not today. The 4000 nit mastering monitors that this Bravia 9 was designed to do. So at the Sony event, they had the Bravia 9, they had the Samsung QN90C, and they had the 4000 nit mastering monitor. They had content Alpha. So that's why I've been showing that movie Alpha, that caveman movie where he's running and there's like a sun, the sun is rising. They had the original trim before it went to production. They had it at 4000 nits. So they were showing us the source, the waveform, 4000 nits, spot on. And the monitor showed where the 4000 nit was. And then they showed the TVs next to it. And only the Bravia 9 was able to come close to that wow, that impact of that sunrise at 4000 nits and the various scenes. So Alpha is the movie. That movie, well, I pulled over the person that was in charge. I said, wait, I want to use this content. You're telling me that if I get it on Kaleidoscope, I'm getting 4000 nits? And he started laughing. He goes, I don't think so. I'm like, what? He goes, well, we know this is 4000 nits. However, what made it to video, I cannot guarantee. On because he has the source video. So I was like, can you send me the source video on a USB or something? He goes, no, I can't do that. But ultimately, we are in the search for 4000 nit content, legit. And this one is legit, but it came directly from their video editing machine. I mean, this was on the software, and they just said, okay, this is what we wanted. Whether it made it to disk is another difference. So it's something that I will work closely with Sony to find out, all right, guys, you guys are releasing movies, Columbia Classics, all of that. Give me your 4000 nit movies and give me the timestamp where I can find it. Because if you're going to sell the Bravia 9 and you're going to sell me the reference monitor, I'm going to have to be able to demo the waveform or all of this is going to come crashing down on your heads. So, all right, let's talk about soundbars real quick. I was so impressed. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. I felt like last years, or it's actually more of a 2021, 2022 model, or 2022 model, the A7000 flagship, it was okay. And the reason why I said it was okay is this. It did not outperform the Samsung QN990 series, right? The 990B, the 990C. It did not outperform it. Yet it cost, I'd say, 50% more for no reason, other than you had to buy bits and pieces. You got the A7000 separately, you have to get the subwoofer separately, and then you have to get the surround separately. Once you added it up, it was almost $1,000 more. I mean, today you can get the Samsung QN980C for like 800 bucks. It's unbelievable because that sounded as good, if not better, than the A7000 system, matched to be similar to the 990C. Now, the Bravia Bar 9, they went back to the drawing board. So two things they did that I think finally they should have done, and I've been complaining about this for a while. They're doing true room optimization to match, they're doing a DSP check, very similar to the HTA9, to match your room's acoustics, number one. Number two, the immersion now feels vertical. I'm feeling the height. I did not get the height before, right? I just got surround, which is good, by the way. It's great. Bed levels, awesome. Now they're adding a bit more volumetric space, so there's some height. And in the demo room, we were watching, of course, Maverick, Top Gun, and a couple of other movies like Venom, where they had really good effects because Sony actually did the sound, right? So we went to Sony Sound Studios before, of course, the Sony Sound Studios to feel true Dolby Atmos and true vertical effects of, let's see, we had a couple of movies we saw. We saw Gran Turismo, Maverick, and Venom, and we had a feel for what it should be like. And then we go and sit in front of the Bar 9, their flagship Bar 9, and it had the Bar 9, the surround satellites were the same. They had the Bar 9, so if you were to buy it, you'd buy the Bar 9, you'd buy the surround satellites, and you'd buy the SW5 subwoofer. And wow, I was like, I need this at M-Wave. So I called Sony, I need to bring this to M-Wave because I think I could convince people not to get a $5,000 system and get this instead. Like whatever the system is, if it's under $8,000, I don't know. This is pretty good, especially in a medium-sized room. Obviously, when you're paying extra, you could fill a large room. But in a medium-sized living room, right? This is so good that I don't think you should spend more. And this also applies to the Samsung QN990C, by the way. So it depends on how much this ends up costing. But if it's like $500 more than 990C, that might end up being worth it. But I was very impressed by the immersion, the clarity of the dialogue. So that's the Bar 9. Now the Quad is the new version of the HTA9. So the HTA9 was their first attempt at that, the four speakers, place it anywhere you want. What was the number one complaint? Oh, I get dropouts. They specifically addressed that on the Quad. So let's put sound quality aside. That's a different discussion we're going to have real quick. But I want to address the number one complaint about the HTA9 is the Wi-Fi wireless dropout. So on the Quad, what they did is added two separate antennas using different frequencies that bounce back and forth, constantly measuring which gives them the best consistent sound quality concurrently. So if one is weak, they go to the other one. So it's seamless. They hop between frequencies back and forth. I'm sure there is some kind of a buffer to make sure that all happens seamlessly, right? But ultimately, this is supposed to eliminate dropouts, and they were not able to do that the first generation because they didn't realize how bad like your home has so much interference. So they took all of that into account, right? So their engineers had a room full of Wi-Fi interference of all types, and this is how they stress tested it. So this should be class leading, seamless, because before, what you have to do, the HTA9, you cannot have it near a router. It has to be line of sight. I mean, there were so many things to help reduce the likelihood of a wireless dropout. The Quad appears to have addressed that. Now, let's talk about sound quality. So the sound quality of the Quad is very similar to the 9 in the immersion. However, and I asked them, they wouldn't answer the question, so I'll answer the question for you. I said to them, look, both of these systems are very similarly expensive, right? They're about the same price. They're both your flagship. But if I was to take one to represent the best of the movie watching experience at M-Wave, because I'm trying to convince people, look, you don't need to get a Storm Audio or a Denon flagship or a Trinnov if you only need 90% of that performance at under $5,000. This is how close you can get. Which would you give me to test out at M-Wave? Because these guys are enthusiasts, right? They have a pocket full of money ready to spend. What do I need to convince them? Start with this and save up for that extra level, like a super giant dual 21-inch subwoofer that this cannot do. But this is a good band-aid. The Bar 9 or the Quad. You know what they said to me? Oh, they're both our children. We cannot decide. They're both flagships. I'm like, what kind of answer is this? So ultimately, let me tell you what they told me. The Quad is the designer's choice. So if you see the images of the Quad, you can hang it on a wall, very flexible, very thin. So ultimately, if you don't want to see your speakers, because a lot of people do not like the appearance of a sound bar just below their TV, the Quad sounds, quote unquote, as good as the 9, but there's a flexibility. You could move it anywhere. Like the HTA9, you could put it on the wall, you could put it on stands, you can make it disappear, and it will still immerse you with sound. But ultimately, I've extrapolated that if sound quality, surround sound quality is what you want, go with the Bar 9. Because the Quad, their design objective is the form is more important than the function, because some people, they really want to get something that is out of the way. You cannot help but add some compromises there. The Bar 9, its specific objective is to be the best in dialogue, right? Oh, that's another thing, is mentioning dialogue. Very similar to the Samsung, they were showing us how they can separate dialogue and then raise that dialogue. It was pretty effective. So they were showing us scenes where you had a hard time hearing the dialogue because the source content was that way. And then, oh, wow, it's like you pulled out the dialogue channel. So Samsung's doing that this year with its QN990D, and Sony's doing it with the Bar 9. So if you watch movies like, was it Tenet, where you could barely hear the dialogue, either the 9 or the 990D should be able to pull out the dialogue very well. But other than that, though, I have to say the 9, very impressive. The Quad, back to back, I heard them back to back, And I felt the quad was good, like the HTA9 was, but I just felt more immersion from the 9 because I had a dedicated, very large soundbar plus 2 dedicated satellites, whereas the quads were, you know what? If I'm an enthusiast, I go with the 9. If I don't care that I have a soundbar, I go with the 9. But the quad is not that much of a drop off. So if that helps you guys decide, let me know if you have any questions about either one. And the 8 is just an affordable. I mean, if you're going with the 8, get the 990C. So this is what I would say. The Bar 8 obviously is expensive than the Bar 9, but at that price, you might as well get last year's Samsung 990C for $800. That will beat anything in 2024 for $800.